Hey, Margie here. Did you ever feel like you're out of alignment, that there's a voice in your head is telling you what to do, or you're not good enough, or you can't do this? And it's really affecting your happiness. Well, today, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what you can do to calm down that inner critic and what you can do to magnify your inner guidance. And this is really powerful in terms of improving your bone health, your overall health, and your happiness. And I'm really excited about our special guest today, Mary Ellen O'Brien. And Mary Ellen is a soul alignment coach who helps you reclaim, trust, and act on your inner guidance to create more passion, meaning, and purpose in your life and work. And I think all of you know that's what I'm all about. Over the last 15 years, she created a proven step-by-step process to help you stop settling and start taking action on your inner guidance to create your soul's desires. And in today's talk, she really goes over what the problem is and where we can start taking action to really make a big difference. So this was a fun interview filled with lots of great steps that we can all do. So stay tuned. Welcome, Mary Ellen. I'm really happy to have you here on the podcast. I absolutely love this topic and think it's something a lot of us ignore. But yet, when we dial this in, oh my goodness, life can just become so miraculous and really affect every aspect of a person's health. So, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about our inner voice. And I see this all the time with everybody I work with, not everybody, but so often we get guidance and we have all these messages and we just feel we're doing what we're supposed to be doing and ignore that. And that's when problems happen. So, why don't you tell me, because this is what you work with, so I'm really happy, but why don't you tell me about, how do we know? I mean, there's actually symptoms that we're not listening to our inner voice. How can we tell that?
Yes, and I've noticed that over the last 15 years working with people, and of course, my own experience started me on this whole path, that it's very subtle sometimes when you just know deep down that something is not right, either your work, your career, your relationships, your health, wellness, and your any area of your life, finances. When you feel that you're not staying true and that there's something missing and it keeps, you have this feeling, and people often say, deep down, I knew I shouldn't have taken that job. Or deep down, I knew I wanted to move for so many years, or I knew I wanted to break up with that person. And I believe it doesn't need to be deep down. So the symptoms are that it feels like there's something you're settling. You know that you're not staying true to yourself. You know you're not fulfilled in any of those areas. And there can be more than one, unfortunately, that are out of alignment. But it feels very unfulfilling. It feels like something's missing. It can go as far as to feel confusing or overwhelming or frustrating. So there's a whole range of emotions, but I know that when you feel like you're out of sync with yourself and you're not happy or fulfilled in a certain area of your life, there's always a way to find more fulfillment, and your inner voice can lead you there.
No, that's so true because so many people do feel out of alignment. They can't like pinpoint it. They just feel, I don't know, I'm out of sync and I'm just, I just don't feel fulfilled. Like they just don't feel that. But actually, before we even get into this more, I love the backstory and I just love how you became this type of coach and doing this type of work. So why don't you just tell us how that happened? Because I know you didn't start out this way.
That's true. So I was in New York City for many years. I lived there almost 20 years working in corporate, in advertising agencies, and I was glad because I was in the creative end, but I thought that it was fulfilling and it was not. So as soon as I realized early on that it wasn't fulfilling, I started seeking and seeking and seeking, trying to figure out what was missing. And that's why I really love doing this work, because it can take decades if you don't have a structured plan of soul seeking, soul searching. So my own path was that I was really frustrated for many, many, many years, knowing that mainly my work was not fulfilling, but then it spilled into all my areas of my life, my relationship, didn't have, so I wasn't, my finances and my physical health, everything winds up getting affected. So personally, I had to do a lot of digging and I did a lot of researching and then I discovered coaching and I trained in that. But I really was able to first find my way out of the hole for myself. And then I knew that once I did that, and I think that too many people settle for not being fulfilled in all these areas when they settle because they don't think it's possible. So once I went through my own personal experience and I just really woke up and started finding fulfillment in all the areas in my life, then it was clear to me that that's what I wanted to help people do. So,
Oh, I love that. And what do you see? I mean, I agree with you. This piece is so important and it is possible. As you know, I teach happiness and, if you don't live life with your passion or your purpose and, why, you are here once, we have one life to live. And I feel so strongly that it's just so important to live it full out, and enjoy it because you have that option and just a lot of people don't realize. So what do you find? Because you're working with all these people, what do you find are the common obstacles? What do you find that really are blocking people from listening to their inner voice and keeping them not living their best life?
yeah. So, one of the big ones that is a little bit hard to detect, but I think it runs rampant in our culture is that we get disconnected or we never really connected in the first place with our true essence and our passions and our gifts and our strengths. So, we're not taught this in school. And sometimes I work with people of all ages, but sometimes someone in after retirement will finally reclaim and discover what they love and what lights them up. So, I agree with you completely, and I know our work is so complementary. So I just love being able to help people um, access what they're good at, what they love, what lights them up. Because so that's one obstacle is that they don't know what would be better. They're not sure what would make them happy. And I know it's a discovery process. It's a muscle we can strengthen. And then another thing, obstacle that gets in the way is when we unfortunately feel like we're too busy and there are other people and other things that come first. And we put ourselves on the bottom of the list and then we never get to ourselves. And so that's a really frustrating one. You feel like you don't have any time or energy for you and what matters most. And then another one is that people have so many inner voices in there. The inner critic can really run the show and jump in the driver's seat way too often. And those are the voices that say, it's too late. Oh, nobody else is fulfilled. It's not even possible to find work or to stick with your health program or find a way to feel really good and find vitality and energy in your physical body. So it's those inner voices, the inner critic voice that gets really mean and drives the car, and that it's drowning out the inner voice, which is always saying, yes, here's the very next step toward what you desire. So it's a very, the obstacles can be external, where we feel like we're too busy and people have demands on our time, or they can be internal, where the inner critic is convincing you it's not possible or, that you doubt it. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask you certain tips that we can all start with. But before we do that, since you've been working with people, what are some examples that where people were able to work on this? And, what have you seen since this is something you've been spending a lot of time on and you're working with so many people? What have you seen?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example of a client so people come to me with health goals. They come to me with career and work goals. Of course, people want to find their sacred soul's work. They come to me with relationship issues. So it can affect every area, as you know, of our life when we're not listening to our inner voice. So I want to give you an example of someone with health goals because that's related to your work. My client came to me and she actually is a health coach herself. And she, like many people, we know what we should be doing, or we have a good idea about how to get started, or we have a health plan. We know which we want to be eating and we want to stick to the exercise. So you might have a plan and it looks different for everybody. And but then there's this very uncomfortable place where we know what we should be doing, but we're not doing it. And where is that gap and why is that? And so I help people with the mindset issues so that they can get unstuck and take the incremental actions. And the thing I like to tell people is that it's such a huge relief when you know you're sticking to your health plan, even if it's at first 10 minutes of stretching a day. Then the next week, I'll recommend, okay, now you're ready to do a little bit more, add a little bit more into your busy life and you feel better and better. So it's always these incremental steps. And so my client was, for some reason, it's easy to coach other people, but she wasn't. She was putting on weight and she was not feeling well. And so we really dissected and really helped her. I helped her see and hear her inner voice to the very next steps. And she was able to really change her habits and get over that inner critic that was stopping her and accomplish in these incremental steps her goals. And she's feeling better than ever. She lost all the weight that she had put on. And I think with any health plan, as well as any career, any goal that you have, any beautiful soul desired can be met and realized by tuning in and then taking those incremental steps. Don't you agree?
I do, because I see a lot of times, it's like a car in the driveway that's not moving.
Yeah.
And you know what you have to do. And what I find it's so often it's just overwhelmed. There's just too much to do. Where do I start? And that causes paralysis. Like, ah. And so that's what's so wonderful about having a coach. If you're in paralysis, okay, let's just do this one piece and just to work with you through this so that you can get to the next stop. Because what I see, you can't ignore this. You're trying to, take my people I work with bone health. You're
Yeah.
trying to move forward and you're trying to get on a program and what you think, what you focus on grows. So if you're thinking, oh, I'm weak, I can't do this, well, you're just going to grow more of that. So you need to step back and do one thing, right? I so agree with you about that, not to get an overwhelm and just gradually build up. And then when you do, as you said, you see amazing things happen. And all of a sudden things start clicking and you're like, oh, wow. Yeah. Because you're on the right path and you're on what your inner voice is saying. You're not fighting with it. And, I just couldn't agree more. So let's you talk about a push pull. And I think that's so important. You want to explain that because I think so many of us can relate to that.
Definitely. And that's kind of what we're talking about. And I think people underestimate the draining of your energy when your inner voice is calling you to make a positive change or to let's take your clients with bone health and they know what they should be doing or just having incremental steps of a plan. And if they have an idea and their inner voice is gently, subtly, supportingly calling them to this goal of feeling better in their body, then if your inner critic is stopping you because you don't have time and everybody else comes first and you just can't find that 10 minutes for whatever reason, that's the push pull. It's like this inner tug of war. And on the one hand, you're being called, and on the other hand, you're stopping it. And that's where it's almost like you have your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time. And you just feel this tension and overwhelm and depletion. So then when you start taking those baby steps, those breadcrumbs of what's the very next thing. And you need to carve out time and say no to other things that drain your energy. So you carve out time for the 10 minutes we're talking about. Then all of a sudden, the momentum starts moving forward. And like you said, there's that feeling of relief, but also you gain more clarity and confidence. And then you start seeing signs that you're reaching your goals, you're feeling better. Um, or in other cases where you're discovering your beautiful work, you're finding your fulfilling career, and you start taking steps by researching, different schools or programs or ways to go about it. Even just doing that and carving out the time, that also gets the ball rolling and you start to feel that relief. So anywhere where we're stuck and we have that push pull and we begin to release the resistance, which is the inner critic, and we begin to trust our inner voice and taking that action, it gets the ball moving forward, which is so freeing. And then if you cut to months from now, all of a sudden you're feeling so much better and you're much closer as you're creating your desire. So I know that you find that as well. Yeah.
Yes, I love this. Okay, so everyone's listening, saying, yes, that's me. That's me. I have this critic all the time telling me, no, you can't do that, or you have to do this. All right, so let's take us. I'm a big into actionable steps,
Yeah.
Okay, like what are the first things you'd recommend people doing? Like what tangible things can everybody listening start to maybe start quieting the critic, or just where do you suggest starting? What's like a baby step or something you would say that everybody listening could do?
Well, I know that some people want to just jump to the area of their life that they want to make a positive change in, career, work, health. But I do think that starting even before that, starting to charge your battery. And when I say charge your battery, I recommend take 10 activities that you love to do that really it's like plugging in your own cell phone. We don't let our cell phones go down to 20%. We need to charge our own battery. And it's activities that do feed your spirit and energize you. So it's taking more time out. It's sitting, and sometimes people are walking in nature. Right now with the foliage where I live, and you live, is amazing. And so it's time in nature. It's time sitting and maybe journaling. It's reading a book. It's doing research. It's connecting with others. It's creative expression, gardening, cooking, but it's all these activities that you really love and that light you up and that energize you, as opposed to the activities that drain you, a lot of technology, or sometimes um, other people, unfortunately, can do that. So it's important if we get our charge up to the higher levels and we feel really energized, then we have more access to our inner voice, because then you're going to know, oh, I want to check that out and I want to call that person. Because when we're drained, the inner critic is louder, but when we're energized, our inner voice is louder. So the very first step I like to recommend is making that list. And when I recommend the list, sometimes people say they can't come up with 10 things, but think about in the past things that you used to love to do. And I do believe that everybody, if they really think about the different areas of their life, physical, social, creative, um, work, they can think of activities that they do love to do and then begin by carving out more and more time by eliminating some of the things that do drain us. So I like to begin there, but as it applies to the areas of your life, if you're really feeling stuck with your health plan, it might help as you make your list of 10 things, make sure you have health related activities that feel good and that you can really feel energized by doing. And then you can focus the following week more on going directly towards your goals in that one area. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes complete sense. And I think what's so sad, and this is what I've seen over the years, is that, people just go through their day. And sometimes they're in a group that totally brings them down. I know one of someone I was working with, it was her church group, and the people were so negative. So she needed to change. She changed the group of people. But sometimes we don't realize we just keep going and we don't take that time, just like you said, to stop. Like, what activities are we doing? Do we love anything we're doing? And what do we love? And why aren't we doing that? It's sad, but it's so true. We just sort of get into not a rut, but I guess you could call it a rut, where we just get into everyday life and don't realize it could be different. And there's so many possibilities, and it's not difficult. So yes, so that's interesting. So what do you think are some of the best ways to quiet, or what do you say to the inner
Mhm.
critic? You know what I mean? Okay, so we're feeling better. We're doing some things we like. Yay. We're starting to get happier and bring more joy into our life, and it's actually fun versus, just going through the motions. But when you do get that inner critic, are there any good techniques when that critic is saying, don't even bother doing the exercises. You're going to fall anyway, or, or, oh, you can't do this with, whatever it is, whatever is your critic, what do you say? Are there some techniques that you can use like right away when that happens?
Definitely. And I do think it's kind of this it's unfortunate that we have this inner critic voice that's running all the time. And I do think that if unless we purposely strengthen the muscle to go over to hear our inner voice, it's we're going to have much more of the inner critic that's much louder, as well as other people's opinions or even culture. So that's why when we start to charge a battery, you start to reawaken who you are and what you love. And you start to notice that, oh, this group really does deplete me and it brings me down. So it's like the beginning of being more aware of how things affect you. So it is a whole process of being able to identify more and more. It starts with awareness. But let's say you start carving out time for more walks or more journaling, something that really feeds your spirit. And you start to hear the subtle, subtle voice. I talk about how your inner voice is like there are 100 radio stations and your inner voice is this really subtle one you have to find first and then turn up the volume. And all the other stations are so much louder. So those are the inner critic voices that we'll talk about in a second. But once you find the inner voice, and sometimes journaling can really help with this, you can write, and as you notice, you might start off venting about a situation or with the people that are bringing you down or the news, or you might begin by just stream of consciousness writing about how you're feeling about some situation. And usually it's negative. But then you might notice people who love journaling, and I know I do, it starts to shift into this very supportive, loving voice that says, it has your inner voice in there, your guidance about spend more time in nature. It starts to guide you to stretch a little bit more and do the things that are beneficial to you. And those are the breadcrumbs that we're talking about following. And the more we follow them, the louder and more clear it gets. But it's so important to notice how good those feel. And when you follow them, you get the positive feedback. But then when the inner critic comes in and it's basically drowning out the inner voice, it's important to simply notice and say, wow, there's that voice, that inner critic voice that says, I can't do it, or I'm procrastinating again. Why can't I find 10 minutes? This is kind of bizarre. So I do think I want to say that our inner critic is there to, in my opinion, to protect us because it wants to sense any danger outside. It's like the fight or flight, but it goes overboard. It's completely outdated. And that's why I love training the muscle to hear your inner voice because that's what we want driving the car. But when the inner critic is driving the car, it's so loud and it's almost hard to notice. So the first process is to begin noticing how mean it is and what it says. So you might write down 5 things it says about your health goals. And then you can start to see, wow, that is not even true. It's illogical that I can't do it. I can definitely do it. Um, so the first step is really becoming aware of it and simply noticing it. And I recommend sometimes writing it down. And we can have inner critics for any area of our life. So whatever area is really wanting a change the most right now, I recommend writing down 5 things your inner critic says, the mean voice inside that says you can't do it or it's too late or other people come first. Um, and it's a way of simply noticing it because once we're aware of it, we can then choose to listen to our inner voice or choose to say, no, I'm not going to indulge that. I'm not going to engage that. It's not true. But if we don't notice it, we just are automatically believing it's true. And then that's how we're living our life from that perspective. So that I'm sure
Yeah.
you can agree with that as well. Yeah.
I love that because I that's new to me about actually writing it down. I'm a big believer in questioning your thoughts, which is very similar, but
Yeah.
to actually write them down because you have to be aware of them. Otherwise, you don't know the negative impact that's having on your life, just like you said. So I love that idea of writing them down and then looking at them and saying, wait, that's not true. Why do I want that controlling my life? That's great. The other thing I wanted to chime in on, because I couldn't agree with you more about journaling. So that's what I do, and I just wanted to share because I love what you said. I do exactly that. I started journaling with with Julia Cameron and
Yes.
writing morning pages, which was just 3 pages. And it's from The Artist's Way. That was her book. And it was what I actually learned back in 2011, even earlier than that, when I was going back to school to be a health coach. And she was one of the guest speakers. And I was like, oh, come on, could this really work? I was sort of being very skeptical about it, but I thought people told me this changed their life. I'm like, changed your life? Okay, I'll try it. And she spent an hour in the morning. I didn't do that. I spent like 15 minutes, but just anything. You just wrote anything. So that's where all, just like you said, could come out. I don't know how to handle this, or this, my voice is telling me this, or you just wrote down anything. But
Yep.
then I sort of moved beyond that. I don't know. Once you start writing it down, you don't have as much. You just get it off your chest.
Mhm.
But then I started actually asking, I would ask questions in it too. And I was getting like amazing answers, that was just brilliant, things that I couldn't have come up with myself. And, so I know it was from, just connecting to the universe, and whether it's my inner voice or what it was, but truly, truly has changed my life, that now I don't even have to do the freehand. I just ask for guidance, and I do this every morning. And it does strengthen. It's amazing when you have that connection and then you do get messages. It's so powerful. I can't say enough about what you recommended, because it is that life changing. And when it goes a couple days and I'm away and I don't have time to do my journaling, it really makes a big difference. So that's such a great tool. And I really love the way you described it, because these are the things that I just can't stress enough what you're talking about. This,
I want to say one thing, right?
yeah,
What if I interrupt? That I remembered that a lot of people say that they don't really know the difference between their inner voice and their inner critic. And that's a big question that comes up often. And I do really believe it's a muscle we can strengthen. So to be patient and just to give ourselves a little space to begin to discern the difference. And what I know for sure is that your inner voice is always loving and always supportive and always, it feels good and it's out for your greatest good. So it's the voice that is really supportive. And your inner critic, for whatever reason, it's mean and it's keeping you down and it wants to keep you safe. And so it's not having you grow at all. So if you have a question, if anybody's listening and they say, well, I don't know if this is my inner voice or my inner guidance, begin to practice in small ways, trusting your inner voice, seeing how it feels if it's supportive, trusting and following it, seeing where it leads. And then if it's the inner critic, it will feel uncomfortable. And I know you also work a lot with the body. And I think a lot of people have access to how they feel in their body as it pertains to these thoughts. So sometimes I'll work with that as well, because when you think the inner critic thoughts, it feels terrible in your body. And the more you can become aware of how these thoughts feel in your body, the more you can fine tune. So really, I see it as strengthening the muscle of hearing your inner voice and following it, and then disengaging more and more from the inner critic. And it's something that is so beautiful to see the shift. It's a subtle but really important, powerful shift.
You said something so important, and that's a question I'm asked as well. Like, how do you know? And what you're saying, if you're writing something down and you're getting this message, like that's horrible, and and really negative and not nurturing and loving, that what you're saying, am I right? That is not your inner critic. I mean, that is your inner critic.
It's
That's not your inner voice. And that's a good way to differentiate. I think that's really important, that you don't get those kind of messages from your inner voice that are punishing, that are saying, no, that's
yeah,
terrible.
exactly.
And I couldn't agree more. And to listen to your body, I always call it, are you contracted? Does that
Right.
make you feel contracted? I don't know, or does that make you feel expanded? So it's the same thing that you're talking about. And I think so many of us are busy with our days and we're so disconnected from our bodies that we don't even realize that we can integrate this and really feel yes or no or yeah. So this is such
And then once you really strengthen the muscle, you can't settle for less. That's the beauty of this, is that you really can't go backwards because it feels too good to be in alignment, stay true to yourself, and know what that truth is. It's
yeah. And then once people start doing this,
Yeah.
Is that what you see, that they just keep
Yeah.
soaring to other levels?
Definitely. And there are different levels of noticing the inner critic. It's like a whole training, masterful, as well as really reclaiming your inner voice. Um, and there's another area where I help people really reconnect with their true essence. And it is your inner voice. It's the same thing, in my opinion, because it's energetically getting you centered in your knowing and your confidence. And that's when you own your gifts. So there's a really fun exploratory process I take people through to rediscover who they are and what they love. So I wanted to mention that too, because I think that sometimes people lose that part of themselves, like I mentioned before. And it's a really fun process. It's like uncovering soul mining. It's like soul searching. So that's another level of this inner voice getting more and more clear. It's
Uh,
really exciting. Yeah.
I love this. Well, tell everybody, I know you have a special gift that you're giving everybody to get people started if they're interested
Yeah.
in, and it's free. So just tell us about I've actually listened to them and they're quite good.
Thank
But
you.
tell us about the videos and where that takes people.
Definitely. It's a free video series called Reclaim Your Inner Voice. And it's 3 videos. So you can do it over 3 days, over 3 weeks, or all at once. It's once you sign up, it's free. You get all 3 videos. And it has a short topic where I introduce a topic, and then it has some suggested homework or fun assignments. And it gets you started on strengthening this muscle and then becoming more aware of what's your inner voice or your inner critic. And it really starts the process of strengthening the muscle. So I invite people to sign up because it's free and it gets you started.
And it's so, it's just so important. It's so much fun. Because I've seen people, where they're really trapped. Just like you said, people are stuck. They don't have passion. They don't have purpose, and ah, to the next level when they have that. And it's just a whole different way of living. It just is amazing, the difference. And when you look back, when people look back, they're like, wow, I can't believe, I was so stuck there. And it's sad. It's sad because, we're given X amount of days. So why spend any of it in that mindset and sort of trapped in that when you can escape and it's possible? And as you said, you see this all the time. And
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's true. And I'll say that everyone kind of knows this, that one of my best friends is a hospice nurse, that on people's deathbeds, and I don't mean to be harsh, but people never regret spending more time at work and doing more and rushing around more. They always regret not spending more time for the things that matter and finding that meaning and purpose. So it's amazing to me that it gets lost in the shuffle somehow when to me it's like it's the most important work, but possibly people just don't realize that it's possible. So we want to give them a chance to experiment, and then you can get hooked on really trusting, hearing, and following your inner voice.
so how do you work with people? Do you work one-on-one? What are the different ways that you work with people?
Yeah, I work with people one on one, and recently I shortened my whole process to 4 sessions because I know that that can help people get unstuck. And then many people choose to continue. But I really wanted to create a short program so people can strengthen the muscles, see the benefits, and get unstuck. And then I also have a self guided video program where it can take you through 9 different modules to do this on your own time. And I just have a free bonus where you get 1 session with me in that program as well. So it's just either the individual program or the self-guided program.
But the best place to start then is listen to those free
Yes,
things and just
definitely.
see where you can take this. And I think it's just so important to bring this up and just bring this into the awareness, because it's important. It's important. And it will make a huge difference in your health goals, when you can release that inner critic and really start listening to your inner voice and making those changes, and it'll reduce your stress, which reducing cortisol has a major positive impact on our bones, and, increasing your happiness has such a, is also correlated to bone health as well as all aspects of our health. So such a win-win. Is there anything else that we've missed that you want to share with the audience? This has been so helpful.
I think we covered it all. I really do. I think, I guess when you're talking about your health goals, I will say that some signs of not listening to your inner voice can be health problems. Because when we keep settling or we keep going against our inner knowing, it can cause physical ailments. So, um, I do think that that's the other huge benefit of listening. And I think it's amazing that you work with happiness and bone health. It goes hand in hand, right?
It does. It does. Your work goes hands in hand really with all health issues because, we too often we ignore this piece. That's why I'm so happy to have you, because telling everybody, do not ignore this. If you're getting those voices, you can deal with it. It's not that you have to. There's ways to to quiet those. And what did you say? You said to really strengthen your inner voice so that you have, the different balance than you currently are having. So love this. Well, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your wisdom. And I'm excited to share this free videos with people to get them started. And yeah, so thank you so much. I
Thank
really,
you. It was such a pleasure. And it's so much fun. And I hope everybody just really can trust and know that they can strengthen this muscle. Thank you.
love it. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, and now have some new tools that you can use to listen to both your inner critic as well as the inner guidance that you're receiving. All the links that Mary Ellen talks about will be in the show notes, and do her program, the 3 free videos, because they're powerful and it really gets you started. And it really makes a difference. I know from my own experience and all the people I work with, why not live your best life? And this is a piece that can really help. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.